Communion, but inexplicably, I could not bring myself to read either. Just looking at the pictures in Intruders or reading the first few pages of Communion would get me extremely agitated. This was odd because I'm an avid reader, but something about these books really scared me. My girlfriend did read them and began urging me to contact Bud Hopkins. It took me a year to overcome my reluctance, but in the spring of 1988, I called him and agreed to come in for a preliminary interview. So this is before the Greys are known. This is before his incident happened, before Communion came out, before Intruders came out, and he's seeing the same thing.
That's a big deal, because my first thought was I was going to roll my eyes. Like, yeah, duh, you're sketching things that everybody knows about. But then no, nobody did know about it at that time. His own girlfriend was like scoffing and rolling her eyes. But I like that after, she saw that bit in the newspaper and realized and connected the dots, then she supported him wholeheartedly.
It's hard to think that there was a different time, especially the early 80s, where gray aliens were not a thing yet.
They inserted something into me. I blacked out.
No.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
What are you doing?
He's having this, this encounter. He doesn't. I mean, he's an early. He's this early 80s rocker, barely a rocker. He went back to. I mean, the band broke up he said weeks after this happened. So this kind of fucked all these guys up because they all experienced the same thing. Rusty, Jay, and Mark.
Yeah.
Poor guys.
Didn't they actually believe him later? That was a really, really long clip we played.
Well,
did they say that they ended up believing him?
Let's hear a little bit more, and let's get a little more clarity on this story from Rusty Hudson of Excalibur. So he talks to Bud. Bud told me that my story and my symptoms were highly indicative of a pattern. He then suggested that if I wished to look further into my experiences, that I should not read his books or any other UFO books. And if I wished, I should undergo hypnotic regression. The purpose of this was to uncover what had happened in the missing time interval between my gazing into the huge black eyes and finding myself back in my own hotel room. He gave me the phone number of people who had already been through the process so that I could ask questions. The only subject not to be discussed was the content of their sessions. This for the same reason I was advised not to read the books, so that I could feel more certain that my memories were my own. Ultimately, I did agree to have my experiences investigated and ended up working with Bud and 2 psychiatrists. The good news was that I wasn't crazy. After being questioned and tested, I was told that mentally and emotionally I was basically healthy. The bad news was that as hypnosis helped me piece together the events of the night, I was faced with a bizarre, unsettling story and the growing certainty that my memories were real. What follows is an excerpt from the transcripts of one of my sessions of hypnotic regression. Do you guys want to hear? Do you guys want to hear me read these hypnotic regressions?
They don't sound that interesting or worthwhile.
I actually wish it was the cassette tape of the hypnotic regression.
This guy isn't cashing in. He just put it in a book, and I don't. Rusty Hudson is an interesting guy. You can still find him. He's out there. He ditched being called Rusty. He just goes by Russ now, which I like that.
I mean,
I prefer Rusty.
That name works for some people. Yeah, I don't think it's a good name in general. I don't think anybody should really take that name and run with it.
No,
but he didn't. That's really brave. It's very brave of anybody to take it and just run with it.
It's hard to do, and some people can pull it off, but
Rob.
This is back when he's just still Rusty, and he's talking to a psychiatrist. So let's have a little back and forth, and let's see what the voice inside my head says. Psychiatrist, what makes you cry? Rusty, very long pause. I remember Jay is really scared, And he said, I won't let them take you. I think he's really scared, and I'm really scared. I wish I could say to him, don't be scared. Why are you scared? Because I'm thinking that the face at the mirror is something in my mind. But then I'm starting to think it's real. And when I start thinking it's real, I start shaking, and I think, no, no, no. You know? No, no, what? Oh, God. It's coming closer, and I don't want to, and I'm saying, no, no, no. But I'm not doing anything, and the face seems real close. I'm almost eye to eye. It's scary. It's almost like a skull. It's like it's smiling, but it's like it couldn't have any other expression than what it was. What about it is scaring you? What about it is scary? Because the power of it is so overwhelming. I can't do anything. I feel like it could just blow me up. Or it could hurt me, and I can't do anything about it. Is that when you start crying? Tears welling up. I start crying because I'm thinking I'm seeing something, and that's just an image in the mirror. I look again, and it's standing there, and it can't be standing there. I mean, how could it be standing there? And angry. Things just don't come out of mirrors or appear in your room, and it just keeps smiling. It doesn't say anything. It's just looking at me. And Jay's going, oh my God. And Jay, he went over and he's crawling on the floor. He's grabbed my ankle on my left foot. I couldn't protect him. Like, I don't know if this is real. We'll sort it out later. Just tell me what it feels like. It's standing there. It's all white. It's pale. It's got a big head. The thing, I just keep looking at its size, though. And how thin the legs, arms, they're thin. How big is this? It's not as big as me. It's like a little shorter than me. Maybe like an 11-year-old kid or shit or something. And that is an excerpt of Rusty Harbor and his psychiatrist going through a hypnotic regression.
Really? A little kid or shit or something?
It's like the Unbelievers. The Unbelievers podcast turned into an audio drama.
That was fantastic, Russ.
Like one of those fan
Yeah, that
fictions.
was.
Good
That
job.
was fantastic, dude. That was great.
Man, that was some theater.
I don't know why me and this Rusty guy, we seem to have something in common where I can just like kind of, I'm very empathic to him. It's his experience. I'm really kind of feeling.
I think it's the height. Yeah,
you know what you reminded me of? You reminded me a little bit of.
I wet my pants. I did.
God damn it. So we got to know what's going on. So later in the session, I described lying on my back on a hard surface in a dark room with bright eyes shining down into my face. I felt as though I was being poked and prodded along my right side. Then suddenly, I felt something cold touch my right arm and the right side of my chest. Almost instantly, my body was flooded with a cool, tingling sensation. I felt extremely relaxed and astonishingly unafraid. I distinctly saw some sort of large black apparatus brought over my chest. I felt groggy, as if drugged. The rest of the experience consisted of a medical examination, although the procedures were very unlike any I've heard about. In fact, the one generalization I could make about the alien environment is that it was completely and totally alien. Nothing was recognizable. It was very difficult for me to get my perception bearings. Towards the end of the experience, I felt a very sharp pain in my left knee. It seemed to throb for quite a while, and I compared it to the sensation of a typhoid inoculation delivered by air gun? What the fuck? I mean, when the hypnotic session was over, the psychiatrist asked me if I had any unusual marks or scars in the area of my leg where I had felt the pain. I said no. However, the following morning at home, I decided to take a close inspection just to put my mind at ease. To my horror, I discovered a thin but well-defined scar, about 1 inch long, in a vertical line just above my kneecap. I feel dizzy. Bud was on vacation, so I called one of the people he had suggested I contact in the event of a crisis. When I described the scar, he asked me to come to his house as soon as possible. He took a look at the scar and said, "You're not going to like this." He pulled up his pants leg and showed me a scar above his left knee that was virtually identical to mine, in the same position, even at the same angle. In order to honor the agreement we had made with Bud, I didn't ask for details of his experience, though he did tell me that, like me, he could not remember getting a deep cut above his knee in any conventional manner. Ultimately, the process of retrieving the forgotten material brought me some emotional relief. I was not crazy about the idea of these beings, whoever or whatever they are, snatching me out of a motel room for mysterious medical experiments. But they had not seriously harmed me. And now that I could remember many of the features and details of my previously nameless fears, I could sleep again. Parts of the incident remain obscure. I still do not know how I got from Mark and Jay's hotel room to that strange place I was taken to. I finally concluded that I must have lost consciousness at some point. The trip back seemed to take only seconds. I now remember entering a small, round room filled with a blue light, a tingling sensation, the feeling of rapid movement, and suddenly finding myself standing at my hotel room door in a complete daze.
Wow.
So this is the story of Rusty Harbor of Excalibur.
That last bit sounded pretty sketch. She said he remembers, well, it only took me 8 seconds to arrive, and then rapid movement, and then just waking up in a hotel room. Sounds a little bit like a prostitute, but you know, people take a lot of drugs, and it gets confusing.
These guys don't, man. He said it.
Sure. Well, he didn't willingly, but he could have been slipped something, and then you never know. After you are on your second round of roofies, you might order up a prostitute. You don't know. Have you been there?
He did say that they did, enjoy maybe a drink or two after. He could have been roofied, but that would mean the whole band would have to be roofied.
Nah, just that one drink or two. Yeah, that's it.
But this is, it's hard to take abduction cases completely seriously nowadays. It's too much out there.
Nowadays, definitely.
I could say I had an abduction. Tomorrow I could get on and describe an abduction completely, and it would be completely probably not accepted at all. You would know
exactly what to say to make it sound credible.
Exactly. No one knows all the cues. Even though Betty and Barney Hill was years before this,
they were hacks. Yeah.
This is not the same. This is a classic abduction with the fear. He's got witnesses with him. They're all traumatized from this. He's in medical experiments. He's got the scar on his knee. He's told by
they have no faces.
Rob is spot on with the clips tonight.
Thank you, Rob.
It's a pretty perfect and obscure. Had you guys ever heard of this story before? Now, I know you guys are just like me, man. You dig this stuff. Have you ever heard of Rusty Harbor before?
No, I hadn't.
I never have.
It sounds like a weird place, Rusty Harbor. I gotta make sure we're getting his.
Sounds like a very nice. Yeah. Not
very nice. When I was a kid, me and my parents, they used to take me on vacation down there to the Rusty Harbor.
Actually, it's Rusty Hudson. Rusty, I don't know why I keep saying
Hudson.
Harbor.
Oh, like
Rusty Hudson.
Yeah, that's how I meant too. We used to go to the Rusty Hudson. Yeah, it was this bar right downtown.
I was about to say, if I'm ever going to open
they let kids in there. It's a good establishment. Mom and pop.
Mom and pop stop.
He sounds like he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame, the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame.
Rusty Harbor.
Rusty Hudson. Rusty
Sorry.
Harbor is his cousin.
He was
Rusty Hudson. He threw three.
No, he was the catcher for the Brewers from 74 to 86.
You guys know me. I don't know anything about sports.
He batted .744. He averaged 15 homers a year, but he's a great catcher. Anyway, but I wanted to pull this together, our betters, our rock and roll superstars, talking aliens. I mean, Elvis has a good story. Jim Sullivan's story is insane.
You know what? Actually, Russ, you brought that story to my attention. That might become a topic of me and my girlfriend's podcast, Serial Spirits, like that because that's a cold case, and that's like it's nuts. Like the guy just went
to dive into.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, I knew we didn't want to do a whole it was perfect for what we wanted to do here. And there's a lot there. There's a lot more you can dig into all these, except maybe Nick Jonas and